Hello everyone, I'm Just Some Reader and welcome to One Man's Book Trash, where I dive into what people don't want to find some real treasure. Today, we're going to be talking about the 1981 sci-fi novel, Deathhunter by Ian Watson. So I saw this book on the shelf in the sci-fi fantasy section and thought, what kind of edgy name is Deathhunter? Then I see this cover. What the hell am I looking at? There's a freaky red batbird thing in the center for one, but I can respect the artistry behind it. It looks like someone actually drew this. But the rest of it? It feels like it was made in 2 seconds in Photoshop. Just get some kind of black and gray gradient for the background, render some clouds, get a gem brush and just on the sides here and you're done. That's when I knew I had to purchase this. Let's read the back of the book, shall we? Murder in the House of Death. Jim Todhunter is one of the elite, a death guide, helping the citizens of a peaceful future world meet the ends of their lives in harmony. When the stability of the house is shattered by deliberate murder, an unthinkable crime, Todhunter receives his fateful assignment, shepherd the killer to his death. But in humoring the murderer's macabre fantasies, Todhunter becomes entangled in a fantastic plan to trap death itself, and what lies beyond death is stranger than anyone imagined. You know, I think this book might have something to say about death. But first, let's get into the author, Ian Watson. Just who the heck is this guy? Ian Watson is a British sci-fi author born in 1943. He got a few degrees in English literature and then taught in Tanzania and Tokyo for a little while before turning into a full-time author in the mid-70s. He's written a ton of books since his first novel, The Embedding, which talks about linguistics and was apparently nominated for a Nebula Award. Apparently, he wrote some of the earliest Warhammer 40k books in the 90s, and also wrote the screen story for Stanley Kubrick's AI Artificial Intelligence, the film, and yes, that Stanley Kubrick. Watson actually wrote a memoir about this experience with Kubrick on his website, which I'll link down below. Ian Watson has actually been nominated for a lot of awards, including 2 Hugo Awards, one for a novelette and the other for short fiction. This man has done a lot for sure, and now he's just chilling in Spain. If you're watching, hi! Do British dudes just love this hat? Anyway, if you want to check out Watson's website, it'll be in the description down below. And while you're down there, perhaps you can like and subscribe. Now let's hop right into Deathhunter. There are going to be some spoilers, so you've been warned. I'll be clear from the top that I'm not a big sci-fi guy. Once things get into multiple realities and timelines and multiverses, my eyes just kind of glaze over. I prefer more grounded stories, but I'm not averse to the more conceptual ones. It's just my preference. Deathhunter is certainly not one of those grounded novels. It may seem like that at first glance when you're starting to read it, but as it goes on, especially when you get halfway through the book, it gets trippy as hell. This makes a lot of sense, of course. The book is about death. It's literally called Deathhunter. They're hunting death. This novel takes place after a nuclear war, specifically between China and Russia, I believe. In the wake of the war, the regions left alive have spurned conflict entirely and have become a peaceful utopia. Depictions of violence have been totally outlawed, and a belief in the afterlife has been replaced with the House of Death. The guides within the House of Death help the elderly and the sick approach their death in a peaceful way through euthanasia. And that's where our story begins. Jim Todhunter, whose last name literally means Death Hunter, is a guide being transferred to the city of Egremont. A famous poet named Norman Harper, who helped usher in this new era with his poetry, is giving one last appearance before he meets his timely death through euthanasia. But then, an ex-death guy named Nathan Weinberger shoots him with a gun. Because of this, Jim now has to guide Nathan Weinberger to his death, because killing someone is bad, so they're going to kill him. It's the death penalty. But along the way, Jim learns what Nathan has been researching in secret, that death is actually a physical thing, and they're going to capture it. That's literally what the thing on this cover is. This is death. This is what comes and takes people's souls. It's this little red batbird thing that's attracted to a pheromone people produce when they're dying. Jim and Nathan do a lot of things to try and trap death and research the true nature behind death and the afterlife, while avoiding people that are trying to stop them, like the leader of the House of Death in Egremont, Noel Resnick. This book has a lot of discussion on the nature of death that is usually framed as discussions between two characters, like some kind of platonic dialogue. Sometimes it just feels like a vehicle for two characters to discuss something that the author wants, than actually moving the plot forward. I'm especially thinking of a scene between Jim and two characters named Marta and Ananda in a restaurant. Like, Watson thought this specific idea about death needs to be in this book, so let's just get Jim to go to this restaurant and meet these two characters he knows accidentally, and then they discuss it. That's what it feels like anyway. There's also a lot of poetry in this book. Really a lot of references to literature in general, but because one of the main driving things about this book, Norman Harper is a poet, we gotta put poetry in there. He's an important part of the novel, after all. The thing is, I think Norman Harper is a shit poet, and so does Watson. There's a little bit of that shitting on in the book as well, but it's also done by Watson in an interview I found on his website. Let's read it, shall we? We'll read this in a British accent, of course, because my man's British. I had written poetry before now and then, usually because I had a character in a novel who was a poet, so I would need to demonstrate this. In Deathhunter, Norman Harper, a deliberately banal parody of Robert Frost, gives vent to saccharine cliches in the style of Frost and Vladimir Nabokov's Pale Fire Poet. In fact, he's such a bad poet, he gets murdered early on in the book. That's funny shit, Watson, my man. Dap me up! Let's read a little bit of one of these poems on page 16. Each life is several generations of births and deaths like transit stations, and then the train returns at last to where it started, in the past. Our death is in us, not out there. It grows out of us, like our hair. It falls like hair, like autumn leaves, and in the earth new life achieves. It's so fucking goofy, man. It grows out of us, like our hair. This is the kind of poetry that gives poetry that rhymes a bad rap, man. Read some, like, Shakespeare or Jonathan Swift, for sure. That shit banger. Let's talk characters. Or I would, but even though I finished this book, I feel like I can't remember any of them. Again, I feel like the exploration of death within their conversations really swallows up whatever characterization they actually have and what personality they have, so much so that I didn't pay attention to it other than what physical characteristics they have. Like, one woman had rings that clack on her fingers that just kind of stuck in my mind. Like, that's all I remember about her. I don't even remember her name. Was it Alice Huron? It might have been a woman named Alice Huron. I don't remember. Something Shapansky? I don't know. Anyway, for our main characters, Jim had a near-death experience when he was a child, when he almost drowned, and now is trying to recreate that experience again by researching death as much as he could. Nathan Weinberger is an ex-guide who is initially portrayed as an insane man, but as you read the book, he progressively starts to sound more and more sane. I can't really remember anything else about them except one thing, which I'll get to later. One thing this book is really good at, though, is ambiguity. It's much like death itself in that way. Just like how we don't know what happens after death for certain, there's this permeating sense of doubt within the book as you're reading it, that you don't know for sure whether what Jim and Nathan are experiencing is actually what happens after death. That's really cool. I liked that bit. The two men search into the afterlife is where the book really picks up, and also where it gets really trippy. What's going on here? Ooh. Jim has a tape from his old partner from his previous house of death that he and Nathan listen to astral project. They do this after they trap the Batbird Death in a cage, and then follow it to the other realm, the realm beyond. But you can never tell what they're experiencing is truly what happens after death, or it's just something their mind manufactured. The other realm is actually what the cover of this book is referencing. Yes, the thing that looks like it was poorly edited in Photoshop is actually relevant to the book. The other realm is full of fog, with all these little gems that pull towards their souls, trying to suck them in, because apparently each little gem is a personal hell that you get trapped into for eternity. Why are they crystals like rubies and diamonds? Why is there fog? I don't know, it's just cool, I guess. That's what they discover on their first trip. Then later, after they've fled into the woods trying to escape Noel Resnick, who wants them both dead now, they astral project again in a little shack by a lake. When they do it this time, they're able to follow this death past the fog. They find a timeless white void with an infinite amount of possibilities to experience for those who have perished. Pretty cool concept, but again, it's cool because we don't know if this is what really happens after death, or if it's just these two guys tripping balls. Then the funniest part of the book happens. They find an angel, a sort of red alien monster that looks like the Deaths, and the angel just explains everything to them. The best part about this is they do this over glasses of whiskey, and the angel, who they name Lau, by the way, gets drunk as hell. Like, can they really believe this angel if it's just intoxicated as hell? Or is it telling the truth in its drunken stupor? Or did they simply imagine a drunk angel explaining it to them because it's just funny? It's very funny, but it's also interesting and trippy to think about the entire time. The red Batbird deaths have been created by these angels, apparently, to transport souls across the fog ever since the fog grew huge after the nuclear war. There's an explanation about the fog and the white space having a sort of ecological relationship, like a ecosystem, but there's also another explanation where it's like the fog is just some weeds in these angels' backyard that they trim every so often. Now, this whole time, Jim and Nathan thought the House of Death was keeping something from them. They thought the House of Death was actually supplying these little red deaths with souls by easing them into death, so the deaths can trap the souls into the gems so that they like mature and then the parasite eats them. And then that a quick way to go, like just killing them before the pheromone has time to exude, will just send you through the hells and back to just to heaven. But instead, it's the reverse, where quick deaths damn the soul into the gem hells because the Batbird deaths can't sense the pheromone and get them in time to bring them to the true, like, heavenly space. Now, this is where the real spoilery bits happen. So if you want to read this book, I'd highly suggest stopping here, going to read, and then coming back. Let's get into it. Jim and Nathan realize they're wrong and then try to signal for help to try and get back to society, and then just live their lives as normal, like ease themselves into death. But they're instead gunned down by Noel Resnick in a helicopter, and Jim's head gets like cut clean off with like a helicopter blade. Oh my god. We then get Jim's point of view as he's dead, traversing the fog and then getting sucked into one of these gem hells. But when he does, he's actually brought back to the beginning of the book when he's on the train to Egramont. But then we pull back even further, and it's revealed that this entire book has been a fabric of Jim's mind. I didn't know this was an actual trope that people use, like, oh, it was just a dream. But no, it was actually just a dream. I feel like this is my first time reading It's Just a Dream, other than Super Mario Bros. 2. Jim is actually a former priest in the House of Life in Montegro, and he went insane and is now undergoing therapy to recover from his psychosis. All the other characters in the book are actually people that Jim knew in life who are like scientists in this House of Life that are all working together, like looking over him, including Norman Harper. But we're actually being lured into a false sense of security. Whoa! Perhaps the world Jim is experiencing is just one reality in another universe. Like the multiple realities in the multiverse. Oh. And he's experiencing a reality where death actually works like that. Then, in a final act to scare the reader with a little bit of horror thrown in there, when Norman Harper is shot in the vision Jim is having, the Norman Harper in reality has a heart attack and dies at the same time. And then the little red Batbird death comes to take Norman Harper's soul. And then the book ends and you realize that this book could just be another reality, a reflection of our own where these things really could have happened. Spooky. And that's how the book ends. There's just one one more thing I haven't touched on. Something that comes up often in the book that is incredibly jarring, that seemingly comes out of nowhere each time, but the book tries to give an explanation for it, even though it really didn't need to be there for this book to be effective. Deathhunter, more like FREAKHUNTER. I swear to God, Jim is the horniest motherfucker I've ever read about. Not the passion of love that you find in a romance book. That's pretty fire. But a man who just has doing the do on his mind all the time. He's like obsessed with it, low-key. It comes out of nowhere. Like one moment he'd be pondering about the nature of life and death, and what role we as humans have to play in this universe of ours. And then the next moment he sees a woman and thinks, this woman must be down horrendous. Right now, she's probably... And then I'm completely thrown out of the narrative, and I'm thinking, huh? Where the hell did this come from? There's no chance in hell I'm reading any of this for YouTube, man. But there's a dream sequence that Jim has where this one woman who he's convinced is horned up for him gets blown up like a balloon and flies away. I wasn't expecting to find inflation in a 1981 sci-fi novel, but here we are. I hate it. Not you, Mr. Snail, you're fine. Anyway, this is all explained because the Jim in Montegro was actually one of those priests. You know what I'm talking about. One of those priests. Disgusting. I think Watson put this deviancy in this book solely because of the fact that when a certain something happens after Freaky Time is completed, the French call it a little death. It's even mentioned in the book. Like, deadass, I think that's the only reason all this deviancy is in this book, and it really didn't need to be. All it does is make our main character Jim FREAKHUNTER. This also kind of ties into the fact that some parts of the book, Jim just assumes something is happening behind the scenes and believes it to be fact. Like, there's one section in particular where Jim is talking to Noel Resnick, and there's a whole tangent that Jim goes on that he assumes that there's an entire secret society of guides in the House of Death that are keeping the good deaths for themselves, and Noel Resnick is trying to be inducted to it and thinks Jim is trying to test him to be inducted into it. It feels like there's no evidence for that at all, and Jim is just going off of very tiny mannerisms Noel Resnick has and like certain words he says. Maybe these parts are meant to further make Jim seem more like an unreliable narrator, but I feel like the constant discussions of death that you're being beaten over the head with while reading this book make the ambiguity, ironically, clear enough. Like, just naturally, I'm going to start distrusting Jim because the book creates an atmosphere of distrust and ambiguity itself. All in all, however, I'm going to give Ian Watson's Deathhunter a thumbs up, thumbs down. Like I said before, it does a good job of entrenching the reader in that sense of ambiguity and makes them question their own reality. It's more of an existential horror novel in that way. Small bits of it are actually really funny. The Angel Gang trunk especially. But given how jarringly freaky it gets at points, I cannot recommend it to everyone. Plus, they get into the weeds and philosophize about death so much that it really starts to drag a little for me at some point. And so I bet it'll really drag for others if they're not into that kind of stuff. But that's going to be it for today's episode of One Man's Book Trash. Be sure to tell me what you thought of Deathhunter in the comments down below. And while you're down there, be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. I've got a lot of secondhand books to get into, and also some ideas for other book-related content as well. So stay tuned for those videos in the future. But on the next episode of One Man's Book Trash, join me as we read Rainy Face, a Toho Project fan comic. I can't believe I found this. I'll see you there!